Alright, hey everybody, welcome back to another video. You might notice I am a little sick. I honestly just woke up not even an hour ago, so bear with me, but I had this idea for a video, so why not talk about it? Definitely am trying to grow the YouTube channel a bit more, so why not pump out some more stuff? Before we get into the video, just wanted to let you guys know, coaching is available if that is something that you want to do. The links are somewhere on my YouTube account. You can also find it on my TikTok where I post more often. But yeah, that is available to you. So, in today's video, we're going to be talking about something important, something that a lot of people tend to forget, and something that you need to be on top of your butt cheeks for. Okay, guys? Accountability. Accountability, but in the sense of what definitions and what labels you're giving everything in the 3D, right? You have to be so careful with this because this is what is creating your 3D. What you're reacting to is creating your 3D, right? So let's kind of frame this in a certain way, right? The labels you mean, the labels and the meanings you're giving everything, or you keep assigning to everything you see, is what perpetuates something in your life. Okay, so think about that, and I want you guys to think about what labels you're giving maybe the parts of your life you might not necessarily like so much, or the parts of your life that you're trying to change, right? It could be a relationship with people, with a certain person, money, whatever it is. What labels are you giving the day-to-day interactions you have with those things, or maybe the lack thereof day-to-day interactions with those things? Are you even really aware of that, right? So you're not really ever reacting to the 3D. And if you guys have watched my videos for any number of time, you'll understand, you'll know that the 3D is simply a mirror, right? And it is a mirror of whatever you've accepted as truth. So if you're reacting to your 3D, you're reacting to your own interpretation of what is going on, right? If you're telling yourself that your SP hasn't reached out, or that maybe you haven't seen them in a long time, whatever it might be, you're reacting to your own interpretation. You're giving it that meaning. You're telling yourself that they haven't reached out. You're telling yourself that, you're not in that relationship, and now you're reacting to the proof of that in the 3D. Now, something to mention, right? Don't get it twisted. Just because your 3D isn't showing it to you right now doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So you have to stay in your knowing that it exists no matter what you see. So I know it can be a little confusing, but even if you're not seeing any proof, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. We'll get to that later, but you have to stay the same no matter what. Stay the same when it shows up, stay the same when it's not in front of you, right? Consistency is what shapes your reality, right? Your identity is what creates everything, but the consistency with an identity is what cements things as truth for you, right? Into the 3D. So something to understand. Sorry, just give me a second here. Drinking hot water like an old man. You're always observing, right? And I touched on this a little bit, but even in the 3D, you're not really ever acting, or you're never really doing anything in the 3D. You're just observing it, right? Everything that you're calling an action is merely just a reflection of a belief or an idea or something that you already believe that you are, right? So another way to look at this, you can see yourself, let's say for work, I'm a barista, right? I see myself, I know myself as a barista, so I will take the natural actions in the 3D when I go to work to be a barista. The action is the byproduct of my identity, but it is natural action, right? It's not forced. I'm not forcing myself to be a barista, right? If I'm not a barista, let's say if I'm a sous chef or something, I'm not going to wake up and start making coffee, right? No, it's not going to happen. But if I was a sous chef, I would naturally wake up and take the actions of the sous chef. And, the same applies to you. Sometimes you might find yourself where you don't take any action, and that's perfectly okay because you're the identity that doesn't need to take action to materialize anything. So understand that whatever action you take in the 3D, you're just observing old action you've already taken internally materialized outward, right? So another thing we have to kind of understand is that with action, right, you're not really, again, like I said, you're not creating your identity, but it is confirming your identity. They confirm your identity because you're taking that action. You're taking that action from a certain place of being. Now, what comes from that, right, is not up to you. It doesn't really matter, right? You might see something good come out of your action. You might see something neutral. Maybe nothing comes out of it, right? But the action in itself does not tell you what you are and what you have. the outcome doesn't tell you what you have or who you are. It's your knowing, right? So you can take an action, and if something good comes out of it, that's great. Maybe nothing happens, right? Maybe nothing comes out of it, and that's okay too. As long as you stay in your knowing, everything is still done. Everything is still happening. Everything is still happening in your favor. Even if your action led to nothing, it is still leading to your knowing, right? You know that inevitably you have this thing. It is still unfolding to that. So something that we need to talk about that's a little more under the baseline, I guess, like layers, right? So more discrete layer is, what are you labeling unconsciously? And we all do this. Even your favorite manifestations coach is. We all still label things, you know, in ways that we might not like. But we're conscious of the things that, the bigger things that we can control in our mind, right? Bigger things that we want in our life. We have easier control over. Maybe sometimes smaller things, you tend to care less about labeling them in a good way, right? But if you're not even at that point, you shouldn't be worried about that. Okay, I'm getting off track. But be so conscious of yourself, right? Be aware of what you're unconsciously labeling, right? So something to keep in mind, right? Most people aren't aware that they're constantly assigning meanings to everything, right? A lot of it happens very naturally. A lot of it happens as just a byproduct of whatever you're seeing. You see something and you label it, and then that label becomes cemented as truth, right? This is kind of how things go. But we don't necessarily have to work in that exact order. Actually, no, you do, or you're still kind of like working in that order, but you're changing how you go about it, right? So some examples I can give you right off the top of my head. How many times have you, and be honest with yourself, right? Be honest with me, right? You can lie to me, but you're still lying to yourself at the end of the day, right? I'm just one person in your awareness, but ultimately it goes down to you. But how many times have you felt as if something isn't working, and then so you've labeled it as it's not working? Or if you're not seeing movement, then you're automatically assuming that you're doing something wrong, right? Maybe you declared that your person texted you today, but then they didn't text you today. Or maybe that you're declaring that you're in communication and no communication shows up. And then so you automatically assume that they don't care, right? I know for a fact you guys have done these things, okay? I was there too. I was there too at one point, right? But you got to understand, right? None of those things are facts. They are not real, right? They're just decisions that you're making based off of circumstance that's old, right? And why would you still base things off of an old reality? So even if you're not seeing the exact outcome you want, you can still have the awareness, and you should still have the awareness to say it's this way instead, because when you're deciding something in the now moment, it's creating your reality. It's creating the circumstance that leads to your end, right? Whatever bullshit you're entertaining in your 3D is what will unfold. You can have bullshit in front of your face, right? But you have the ability to say, no, I don't tolerate this. I do not deal with this. This is not my issue, right? And move on. Because you have to be able to know yourself as God. If you are God, what do you tolerate? What meanings are you giving everything? You have to understand you're the most powerful being on the fucking planet. Everything has to go as you say. So be so conscious, be so aware, be so for real with what you're doing, right? So stop basing your decisions off old shit in the 3D. That just doesn't matter. Your labels matter. It's very important that you're aware of how you're labeling things, right? So again, I know I've talked about the 3D a lot, but you guys really, I'm going to keep hammering it down because a lot of people just need it sometimes, right? The truth of the 3D is that it's old shit. It is old stuff. It is delayed old crap that is materializing out. It's old identities playing out. Even the identity that you're in favor of now, when it materializes in 3D, is still just an old identity. It's still just materializing old stuff, right? So even if you're consciously being that identity right now, it is still an old memory that, or old, not memory, but old identity that's still playing out. So be aware of that, right? So you have to stay the same all the time, right? That you have to stay the same all the time. Like I said before, if you keep reacting to the 3D, then, and giving it bad meanings, right? Then you're just keeping the past alive. You shouldn't be, you really cannot allow old manifestations to dictate the state of your future and what will happen or unfold for you, right? As for forgetting your power, right? I did mention this kind of already, but you guys have to remember, you're the one who decides everything. You're the one who decides what everything means. You cannot wait for reality to tell you what's happening, right? Instead, you have to tell reality what is happening. You have to be the one to tell reality what's happening, even if it's not visually there, right? If you decide something isn't working, or rather, if you keep deciding that something isn't working, right? Because a lot of you are perpetually doing this, then what do you think is going to happen? You're going to keep finding yourself in a loop of looking for an answer, trying new techniques, trying to find a new identity that feels right for you. And then what? You're going to have such, maybe hot and cold isn't exactly the right word, but I'll use it for this case. You're going to have hot and cold experiences, but you're also going to you're going to feel so lost, right? It's like I said, you can feel like something isn't working and still decide that it is. You can visually see nothing happening, but still know everything is happening, right? Your power is in your decision. It's not in your visual perception of what's going on, right? Your perception definitely matters, right? Because your perception allows you to label, but it is your decision at the end of the day that dictates everything, right? Right? So another thing we have to understand is that every event, every circumstance, everything is neutral, okay? So even if it's good, it's neutral, right? Everything happens in a neutral basis, and then we place reactions or labels onto it from then, right? So some of the newer thoughts, maybe newer labels I want you guys to adopt, right? No movement. If you're seeing no movement, then everything is still happening behind the scenes, right? Everything's happening behind the curtains. You're just not aware of it, or you just can't visually see it yet, but you know how the story ends, right? If you think there's delays, everything is happening perfectly. Every puzzle piece is clicking perfectly in order to unfold beautifully for you, right? Silence. This is a big one, right? Silence is just confirmation that everything is still working, okay? It isn't a rejection, but it's knowing that everything is still happening perfectly, right? And silence is kind of a vague one. This is one I just used for silence, but you can really give it any meaning you want. And that goes for all of these things. You can give them any meaning you want. Right. So if you're somebody who's experiencing silence in the 3D, definitely you have the power to do what you want with that, right? You could just be aware that they're still thinking about you, still craving you, and wanting your presence, even if you're not like seeing that, right? It's like the easiest thing you could do, right? So another really key part here, you don't have to force positivity. You don't have to force yourself to feel good, right? Feel whatever the fuck you're feeling, but just stop assigning everything a negative meaning. It's that simple. When you guys complain about your circumstances, what are you doing? You're keeping the circumstance alive. Stop fucking complaining about your circumstances. Stop complaining and telling other people all the shit that's going wrong in your life. Because what are you doing? You're keeping it alive, right? Maybe you can get away with it with some smaller things in your life that you don't necessarily give a fuck about, right? Maybe like traffic, maybe like a certain coworker, right? Work, maybe you don't really care too much about that. You don't necessarily care too much about the traffic, right? Maybe your commute. You can continue to argue and complain about that all you want, right? But when it comes to these bigger things, quote unquote bigger, right? They're not really bigger, but like everything is the same. But we tend to think of it as a bigger thing, right? You don't have to keep complaining about why the circumstances aren't the way you want them to be. All right. And I know what that's like. Okay. I've been there too, right? But you have to understand, you got to take accountability for why things look the way they do outside. It's not for no reason. Okay. So if you're going to assign meanings, give everything a better, more favorable meaning, but just stop giving it a bad meaning. Okay. And start catching your labels in real time. The second you notice your mind trying to give a definition, you can step in, be like, nope, it's this way instead, right? Ask yourself, do some self-inquiry. All right, this is really good. I tell all my clients to do this. So you guys are getting a little bit of some sauce that I give to my clients that pay for stuff, right? So you want to ask yourself certain questions like, okay, what meaning am I giving this right now? Right? Is this based off an old reality? Am I assuming something because it was old? Right? If I was already the version who had whatever I wanted, would I be entertaining this? Would I care? Right? What would this mean to me if I already had it? Right? Then you do all these things and then you consciously give it a better meaning. Now, you don't go around digging in your past and trying to solve all the fucking mishaps and all these misidentifications of the old, because when you keep doing that, you're digging up old shit will find you. And also you're bringing the dead back to life. We don't want to do that. I mean, you just in the moment consciously are more aware and you're just deciding how things are. Okay? So that's what we want to do. This is how we want to start practically changing that. Okay? So again, I want to remind you guys as we end off the video, everything comes back to identity, right? Everything comes back to identity, okay? If you were already the version who has it, would you entertain this thought? Would you entertain this feeling? Would you entertain this memory, visual, dream, whatever it is, right? Would you say it's not working, or would you just know it is? Would you say it's not working, or would you just know that it is? Okay? Let that be something that sticks with you for the rest of the day. Because if you knew everything was already happening, if you knew it was already done, then you wouldn't care so much about what's happening outside, right? If your SP's not showing up how you want them to exactly, that's okay, because you know they will, right? If your SP treats you in a certain way, it's just an old materialization, but you still know you deserve the respect. You still know you deserve whatever it is that you're claiming about yourself, right? And inevitably, they have to show up that way, okay? You don't have to be so upset at them for what happened, but understand why it happened, right? So that's really it, right? Today's video was, I was gonna say it's kind of quick, but it's like 15 minutes, 16 minutes. I can't make quick videos. I'm sorry, but yeah, like just be more conscious of what you're labeling, guys, and definitely be more aware of what you're entertaining, especially what you're entertaining, right? So stop letting the 3D tell you what things mean. You're the one who labels everything. Stop labeling things poorly, right? And see everything as neutral until you can decide whatever you want it to mean. Okay? So that's about it for this video, guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.